Hey everyone, this is Ken with the Adventure Guide, and today I'm doing a quick guide for investigating Bigfoot in Anderson County, Texas. I'm going to go over the sightings in the area, and then I'm going to present to you different locations that you can set up and possibly look for Bigfoot. So our first encounter takes place in November of 1978, and it was the first week of deer season in that year. A group of hunters were taking advantage of that first week of deer season, and they were camped just along the Neches River, south of Highway 84 and just west of the river. They're about 20 yards from a creek or so where they set their tent up and their camp. They had all been camping along that river for about a week. However, this drizzle set in on Thursday, so they decided, let's just stay here around the fire and enjoy ourselves. So they put their chairs around the fire and they began joking back and forth, and they're laughing, having a great time. 7 o'clock rolled around and they noticed that the forest had just gone completely silent. All the frogs croaking and the crickets chirping came to this complete abrupt silence. And they talked about how uncomfortable this felt. It was very creepy and very eerie. However, they just went back to joking around, and then the silence was shattered by this really funny sound. They described it as funny and eerie. They said it sounded like Donald Duck and a deep voice with high pitches and whistles. They looked at each other in amazement. Nobody had any idea what it was. However, they got a chuckle out of that sound and they went back to laughing and talking. Around 8:30 or so, they decided to call it quits and go to bed early so they could get up extra early and get out to their deer stands. And so 3 of the guys laid out their sleeping bags on the floor, but one guy had lugged a cot in there with him. And he set his cot up against the tent wall, and they went to bed. About 20 minutes after settling in, the man that was on the cot sat up and shouted something had brushed his head from outside. The group began to laugh and tease him. So they all settled back in, and 5 minutes later, it happens again. This time they took him serious, and they put their boots on, and they all went out of the tent. They said there was this wicked smell like a rotting corpse, and something really musky. The moon was full and shining bright, and they could see very well, but there was nothing there. So they all get settled back into the tent, and just as they lay down, one of the hunters is like, I gotta go to the bathroom. So he gets up, puts his boots on, grabs his flashlight and his .44, and he heads out of the tent. He goes about 20 yards behind it to a tree right by the creek, and he starts relieving himself. About halfway in, he starts getting this horrid, eerie sensation. The hairs on his body spike up, and he just knows he's being watched. He feels like he's in danger, and then all of a sudden, he hears this heavy breathing. He slings his flashlight in its direction, flips it on, and not more than 5 to 6 feet from him was this massive hairy being. He said it was about 8 to 9 foot tall, and he guessed it weighed around 500 pounds. Now, he could tell you more about like its face and skin color and such. He said that the skin was this blackish gray color, that the hair was like a brown and rusty color that covered all of its body pretty much. Its lips were super thin, and it had a broad, flat nose. The eyes were completely black, and you couldn't see any white around them at all. He had notably small ears for his size, and they were perched on a cone-shaped head. The hair was very thin on its arms and chest, and it had these super long fingers, and the palms of his hands were like a charcoal black color. Now it lifted its hand up into the air, but it was just to shield it from the flashlight. He said this thing made no aggressive actions towards him. And later on, in reflection, the hunter said that this thing was only there to simply check him out. He turned towards the tent and screamed for help, and the other 3 hunters were coming out. He looks back over at the thing, and it was gone. It started running off into the woods. His friends were out there as quick as they could. They couldn't see it, however, they could hear this thing just tearing through the woods. This was definitely the thing that was emitting that smell earlier. Now the hunters ran to his aid. They're standing by him and they're listening to this thing disappear into the woods. All of a sudden, all 3 of them bust out in laughter and they begin to point at the hunter's leg. And unfortunately, he had finished going on himself while standing there in fear of this thing. The hunter said the most terrifying thing of all of it was that it made no sound coming up on him. As a matter of fact, if he hadn't heard the breathing, he'd have never known this thing was there. It was only 5 to 6 feet away. And it was almost like it glided instead of walked. The next morning they packed up to leave after this event, but noted that the thing had tore up the opposite side of the bank right there at the creek as it was climbing up on the other side. And here's the approximate location of that sighting. The next encounter took place in the summer of 1983 when three teens were riding their bikes out and about in the deep piney woods. They were enjoying the slight inclines and declines that made small valleys and hills just southeast of Palestine, Texas. As it began to get dusk, they crested the top of this hill, and before speeding down and heading home, they stopped to take a breather. And as they were catching their breath, they looked across the little valley to the top of the other hill, and there stood something about 7.5 feet tall. It was covered in brown hair with rusty reddish streaks running through it. It had a, quote, creepy face that was not human but humanish looking, with a wide flat nose, and instead of a cone-shaped head, this one had a round-shaped head. The thing appeared to be amazed by the boys on their bikes. In fact, after 30 seconds of intently looking at the boys, it bent over at the hips, reached down, and grabbed a hickory nut. But while it did this, they said that it kept its eyes fixated on them. It then took the hickory nut and just cracked it between its index finger and thumb. Then it tossed the shell on the ground and the nut in its mouth and chewed it up, and the boys said that the jaw moved really funny as it was eating. It then turned and slowly walked away. However, one of the strange things about it is that it could crane its head around. It could turn its neck and head, and it was looking over its shoulder at the kids. The boys pedaled home as fast as they could, which was about 3 miles away. They ran into the house and they told the adults, who just laughed at them. The boys were so upset that a number of adults went with them back out onto the little dirt road and back out to the site, and there they found these really large tracks, but the adults just made excuses to blow them off. And this is roughly the area where it took place. The third sighting took place around 2 a.m. in the morning, not long after Valentine's Day, just northwest of Palestine, Texas. Two 16-year-old boys were out driving a truck using a spotlight to search for rabbits in a pasture. There was a ground-clinging fog that was making the hunting a little difficult, though it was a light fog as it rolled about 2 feet off the ground or so. As they scanned the area, their spotlight landed on a massive 8-foot-tall bipedal creature that was running excessively fast towards a barbed wire fence on the other side of the field. It had grayish fur and very, very long arms. It cleared the fence with ease, like it wasn't even there, better than a deer, and it also landed so stealthily that they didn't hear it make a sound as it just came across from a giant leap. They only saw the creature for about 3 to 5 seconds before it disappeared into the dark. They sat stunned in terror for a few minutes and then fled the scene. Neither of the boys returned for any evidence. They never went back to see if there was any footprints or anything like that. And this is the general area of where they saw this thing in the pasture. Our fourth encounter takes place in October of 1998. A man was driving out to Wolf Creek Lake in Anderson County to do some night fishing. He was on the road near the lake when he decided to stop and take a leak at around 9:30 at night. He stopped his vehicle, jumped out, went about 20 yards into the woods when he heard a loud thrashing coming towards him. He turned around and started back to his truck. When he stopped, the thing would stop. As he neared his truck, this thing charged full blast like a buffalo running through the trees, snapping everything as it came. The chase was on. He began running from it full blast, jumped into his truck, and started to take off. When he looked back in his mirror, he saw a massive dark figure on two legs standing in the road, only 10 yards from the back of his truck, and it was absolutely much taller than his truck, according to this eyewitness. And this is the general area that this all took place. Our fifth sighting takes place on June 15th of 2001, just south of Palestine and west of Elkhart. A boy, his girlfriend, and his cousin were sitting in a field late at night, just sitting there chatting, having a great time on his grandparents' land. It was around midnight when his cousin hollered to look at something that was coming right towards them. All three saw a 6.5 foot to 7 foot tall, excessively bulky silhouette with super long arms heading right at them. It just appeared as they had been looking in that direction seconds before, and this is a field, and now there it is. They stood up to flee or fight if need be. As they stood up, this thing crouched down. They all ran to the car, and the girl went flying through the passenger side into the driver's seat. The cousin jumped in, went into the back seat, and he stood outside of the car. She flipped on the headlights, and this thing was gone. No idea where it went to in that small amount of time. The next day, though, they noticed there was a large hole in the field that was made by his grandfather. They believed that's where it was hiding and had been watching them through the evening into the night, and then had gone back into it when they turned the headlights on. The couple later married. And this is the general area, not this specific tract of land, but upon this road somewhere. The sixth sighting took place in 2009, and it may have been a Bigfoot sighting or a possible dogman sighting. At any rate, this took place northeast of Palestine, Texas, and this guy swears up and down that there's these two government facilities. He gave specifics to one, and sure enough, there is something weird there. However, because it fits more of a dogman description, I'm going to put that in a different video, the Dogmen of Anderson County. The seventh sighting takes place on May of 2011 on County Road 463, but we don't have a specific location, and it is a fairly long road. However, family members were out hunting on their land when these creepy, eerie noises that they'd never heard before started erupting from the forest. They know these woods extremely well and the animals that live in it, and they are 100% sure this was not a native animal. Then later on in June, on the 16th, a lady was walking out to her camper. She opened the door and she saw something moving to her left. So she looked over and she saw a large bipedal animal walking. In order to look at her, she said the thing had to turn at the waist with only a slight stiff move of its neck. It was fairly well lit by the neighbor's yard, and it appeared to be 7 to 8 foot tall to her. Took the lady 2 days to tell her husband about this thing. He believed her, for he had found these massive footprints in the back of their property, and they actually went out and took some pictures of them. It ended up being about 14 inches long and 7 inches wide. However, I wasn't able to locate any pictures of these footprints. They found this one area out on their land that was completely out of place, and it looked like it was a breeding or nesting ground. It was these 3 cedar trees that were pulled towards each other, and there was certain debris around those that made this 7 foot diameter, and like I said, this thing was completely out of place. Then on August 8th of the same year, there was a different relative out hunting on the property, and as she looked over towards her neighbor's house, she saw this bipedal creature walking across the property. The neighbor's yard made it very visible, and she said it absolutely was not a bear, and it definitely wasn't a person as well. To top it all off, a game camera snapped this photo of ice shine. You can see that it's behind the feeder, and by measuring parts on the feeder and then the space between the eyes, this proves that this is not any animal known in North America. And as I said, this is a very long road, and there's no telling where it took place on which tract of land. Now I'd like to cover 12 locations within Anderson County that I suspect would be great locations to set up and investigate for Bigfoot. This list is comprised by looking at Bigfoot sightings throughout the United States and finding the common thread or the common trait of the terrain that all these Bigfoot sightings were found at. The first 5 locations will be friendly for cars. They'll be car accessible. However, 6 through 12 will require a 4-wheel drive to go out and visit. Also, the coordinates to all these locations will be found in the description below. Alright, let's kick this off with number 1, Brushy Creek. So the reason I chose this location is it has 3 factors that we see at a lot of the Bigfoot sightings. Number 1, it's deep in the forest. Number 2, there's water. And number 3, there's a fording point. So Bigfoot, just like humans, seems like it always looks for the path of least resistance when traveling. And you can document this yourself by just mapping out all of these sightings and what the terrain was like. Therefore, Brushy Creek is a perfect location, and it's located northeast of Palestine, Texas. Number 2, Caddo Creek. Just like Brushy Creek, it has all 3 of those factors: deep in the forest, water, and a fording point. Caddo Creek is also located northeast of Palestine, Texas. Number 3, Long Branch. Once again, it meets all 3 of those factors. However, this time, it's located to the northwest of Palestine, Texas, in the Gus Engeling Wildlife Management Area. Number 4, Catfish Creek. Once again, it meets all 3 of the factors we previously talked about, and it's located northwest in the Gus Engeling Wildlife Management Area. This is a hot spot for previous sightings of Bigfoot. Number 5, the boat ramp at Trinity River on Highway 287. Believe it or not, there have been a lot of Bigfoot sightings at the boat ramps. I have no idea what the reason is behind all these sightings at boat ramps. I just know that it's popular to see them there. The boat ramp on the Trinity River is located to the northwest of Palestine, Texas. All the locations from this point forward will most likely need a 4-wheel drive. However, if you have a car and want to try to go out to these locations, I highly recommend that you go during daylight hours so that you don't get stuck. Number 6, Snake Creek. Snake Creek is located in a forested area with a river and a fording point. It's also located on a rarely used country road, and this is another factor that helps add to the possibility of locating Bigfoot. Snake Creek is located southeast of Palestine, Texas. Number 7, the Neches River. Once again, we have the deep forest, a river, a fording point, and a rarely used country road. 4 great factors for finding Bigfoot. This location is east of Palestine, Texas, between highways 84 and 294. Number 8, the marshy area of the Neches River. Once again, we have those factors of water, deep forest, a fording point. However, we've got 2 new factors. This is a marshy area. And marshy areas are where the vast majority of Bigfoot sightings take place in Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Another super important factor is shapes. It seems like Bigfoot has the ability to not only see shapes from a distance, but has the ability to memorize where they're at with a photographic memory. I believe if Bigfoot does exist, that they use these shapes to navigate. Because we often see them around arch trees, Indian trees which have 90-degree bends. We constantly see them around man-made structures, especially tall ones and ones that are abandoned. For instance, up in Polk, Arkansas, the most popular places to catch sightings of the monster is at the oil tanks and at the abandoned railroad trestles. I think there's been 3 sightings at the trestles. Not only are oil tanks and bridges popular to sight them at, but graveyards are a huge one. I was surprised to see how many sightings were near graveyards. The marshy area of the Neches River is located northeast of Palestine, Texas. Number 9, the Neches River off of County Road 338. There is no man-made structures, no bridge. However, this is deep in the forest and it has a clearing that you can set up in. Number 10, Boggy Creek. No, unfortunately, this is not the Boggy Creek from the famous movie in Polk, Arkansas. However, there has been a number of sightings on Boggy Creek down towards Leona, Texas. This site is located on a rarely used county road. It has a fording point, it has a marshy type creek that runs through it, and it's deep in the forest. A perfect location. Number 11, Indian Creek. Of all the locations I have to present, this would be the one that I would choose. 1, it's in the deep forest. 2, you have that creek right there. But 3, that bridge looks like it's rarely used or has not been used in a long time. This, my friends, has got to be a prime location. Indian Creek is located almost directly north of Palestine, Texas. And last but not least, number 12, Catfish Creek. Located on a rarely used road in an area with a lot of trees and a marshy type river. Catfish Creek is located northwest of Palestine, Texas. And remember, sites number 6 through 12 would require a 4-wheel drive to safely get to. Alright guys, as I said, all of these coordinates are located in the description below. Please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Again, subscribe. I've got a lot of great videos coming out and already have some on my channel concerning treasure hunts, where to look for cryptids, where to find gems and fossils, and where to explore the abandoned. Alright guys, that's going to do it. And until next time, we're off on another adventure. God bless.